that actually this transition to net zero is in our self-interest. This is the best policy choice. We see this as a huge economic opportunity. But I think the single most important difference has been the political mandate, if you like. So clear and consistent.
How is that possible? I mean, you came to Korea 3 years ago. You saw what's happening politically in Korea. I mean, there can be some difference even in your country from Labour and Conservative.
Yeah.
미국이 기후 대응에서 후퇴하는 사이 전 세계 녹색 전환의 리더십을 선점하겠다고 발표한 나라, 바로 영국이었습니다. 영국은 지난해 마지막 석탄화력 발전소 가동을 중단했습니다. 영국은 녹색 대응에 다름 아닌 일자리와 경제의 미래가 있다고 보고 그런 식의 정책을 쓰고 있는데요. 이런 판단 어떻게 가능했을까요? 오늘은 특별히 게러스 위어 주한영국대사관 부대사 모셔서 이야기 나눠보겠습니다. 인터뷰는 영어로 진행되고 아래 자막이 나간다는 점 참고로 말씀드립니다. 그럼 바로 시작하겠습니다. Mr. Weir, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. It's great to be here.
So good to see you. When did you first come to Korea?
I arrived with my family in July 2022, so coming up for 3 years, and they've been three very, very good years.
Okay. Have you ever been interviewed by Korean media while you were in Korea?
So I've done some public engagement, media engagement, particularly around the state visit, where President Yoon went to the UK and was hosted by His Majesty. So we did some media before that and after that. So some experience of media here in Korea.
But not like this type of...
But no, not this. This is my first time.
Okay.
Delighted to be...
We're honored and happy.
Well, no, not at all. Delighted to be part of it.
Okay, good. Do you personally have a particular interest in climate action issues?
Personally, yes, very much so. I'm somebody who loves the outdoors and nature. So in my spare time, I like to explore places, particularly in Korea. I'm a father, so I'm someone who thinks about children and my children's children. And I'm also someone who's been fortunate enough to work in different countries. So I've been posted to Mozambique and Nepal. And so I've seen, if you like, the climate debate and the impact of climate in different countries to understand what effect it's happening. So yes, it's something I followed for a long time.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about your government. The UK government is doing a lot to tackle the climate crisis. What are some of the important initiatives?
You're absolutely right. The UK is very much trying to lead on the climate agenda internationally. And I think it's more than initiatives. The way the current government has framed the clean power and the race to net zero is a mission. They have 5 missions, the current government. And one of the missions is this net zero or clean energy and enabling net zero. So it is by definition, therefore, long-term and whole of government, if you like, whole of society ambition to get to net zero. And I think the fundamental belief in the UK is that the cost of inaction, effectively by pushing the problem to the right, will be far greater than addressing the cost now and the opportunities they present today. And so it's based on that we have a mission in our government domestically, but also based on that sort of very solid, ambitious domestic change agenda is also internationally. And at COP just last year, our Prime Minister announced an even more ambitious NDC for the UK and is looking to partner with other like-minded countries and share and collaborate with others who are also on the kind of transition to clean energy. And we've launched a global clean power alliance, including inviting people like ROK to be part of.
Okay. Well, in line with what you just said, last September, Prime Minister Keir Starmer attended the 29th COP, the Conference of the Parties, to the UNFCCC in person, and he talked about the race for the clean energy jobs and green economy for the future. Many saw this as the UK trying to position itself as a leader in the global green transition. So how is your government or your country doing on that front?
It's a great question. And I think we are making significant progress. Our emissions continue to decline. I think last year it was 3.6% year-on-year decline, and that's 54% down on our peak emissions. We also last year significantly closed our final coal power plant in the UK, which marks the end of, I think, 142 years of coal power in the UK. But also the government doesn't mark its own homework on climate and climate action. We have established an independent climate change committee, who's a body of experts that report directly to Parliament, if you like, the National Assembly, not the government. Sure. And they get to advise and judge the progress of government. But we still have a long way to go. We have big ambitions, 2030, to get to clean power, 95% clean power.
95%?
95% clean power by 2030.
Wow.
I think we're currently at 60%. So I think in the next 5 years, the UK set ambition to triple offshore wind, to triple solar, and to double onshore wind.
Wow.
In order to get to that 95%.
Okay. Well, that sounds really impressive. But when it comes to actual implementation, there can be some challenges. What are some major challenges that your country has faced so far in transition to this green?
Yeah, it's a very significant transition, as you say. If you think about how we're trying to transition huge industries, how we power our country, how we live our lives in many ways, it's big transition. So there are challenges, like every country. In the power space, I think the biggest challenge we have is on sort of battery and storage, and trying to ensure that we maximize the excess renewable energy so that we can level out some of the peak loads. But beyond that, I think one of the biggest challenges we face is decarbonizing our housing sector. I don't know if you've been to the UK, but we have lots of very beautiful, historic, old buildings, hundreds of years old, and they're often poorly insulated and not very well heated. And so actually, and they're slow to turn over. So actually, decarbonizing our buildings is going to be a big challenge for the UK in the long run.
Well, this is a question that I would always wanted to ask. Well, I saw a IEA statistic, and it shows in year 2000, 25 years ago, Korea and UK, their renewable energy proportion in electricity generation was around 2%, around the same.
Yeah.
But in 25 years later, present, UK, it's almost, as you said, close to 50%, maybe over 50% this year. Korea still lingering around 10%. What made your country huge transition from coal or fossil fuel based to renewable energy based in a rather short period of time?
It's a great.
What's the secret of the success?
It's a great observation. I would say two things. So one has been on some of the policy innovations. So I think one of the things the government has done is for example, the contracts for difference, which effectively is an auction the government runs to set a price. That is a guaranteed price for offshore wind developers. So they know then what the price will be and can build their financing around that for the long term. So I think that has been essential in sort of giving stability to specific investments in offshore wind, which have grown hugely over the last time. But I think the single most important difference has been the political mandate, if you like. So clear and consistent political mandate over those 2 decades plus, that clean energy and net zero is bipartisan, the way that we need to go as a UK. And I guess the heart of that has been that actually this transition to net zero is in our self-interest. This is the best policy choice long-term for UK, both from a national security perspective, an energy security perspective, and also for an economic development perspective. Back to your question about the race. We see this as a huge economic opportunity. So I think that long-term, clear, bipartisan signal has allowed industry and allowed people to transition, investment to come in, and for us to then reshape our trajectory on renewables.
You just emphasized bipartisan consensus. How is that possible? I mean, you came to Korea 3 years ago. You saw what's happening politically in Korea. I mean, there can be some difference even in your country from Labor and Conservative. What made these two major parties which can have differences in many issues.
They do.
But for energy transition and climate change issue, they had bipartisan consensus. What made that possible?
It's a good question. And I think, to be fair, it is more contested now than it has been over a period of time.
Okay.
But I still think at the core, I would say maybe there are a couple of things. One is that I think there's the belief that the energy security, that we need long-term energy security.
Okay.
And our current model exposes us too heavily to the fossil fuel markets, which have driven up prices in the UK. A lot of the electricity prices come from our overexposure to fossil fuels. So there's a belief that getting energy security is absolutely key. I think two then is that they do see this as an economic opportunity. This is not necessarily just a cost. Looking at it, looking at the investment, looking at the transition, positioning the UK as the place to go to invest in renewable energy, for example, and then export those services. So I think both the sort of economic opportunity and an energy security piece. And then finally, I'd say it's a science. So I think the science on climate, I would say, is unequivocal in terms of the impact climate is having on our world. And therefore, the science has been at the heart of our policy making, that this is credible and that actually we need to respond to the science, right? So how we do that is the debate. But the facts are clear that climate change is happening. And so we need to determine how do we best respond in our national interests.
I heard that your country has initiated this 2035 NDC, and you announced that earlier than most of other countries, including Korea. What is your goal, and how do you have specific plans, strategies to make that happen?
Yeah, you're right. So in Baku late last year, our Prime Minister, who'd just been in power, just got elected a month before that, I think, went and announced an even more ambitious NDC, I think 81% reduction by 2035, which built on our pledge of 68% by 2030. And as I said, I think two reasons. So one is that to make that we fundamentally believe in the Conference of Parties, the international systems around climate change. And actually, we need to make a clear statement of what good ambition looks like. And so I think the PM, our Prime Minister, wants the UK to be in a leadership role and therefore had to demonstrate leadership domestically. So one was to seize the opportunity to create or maintain momentum around climate ambition. And that's significant. The UK is a G7. It's a big industrial, significant economy making clear signals. The other, though, is back to where I said, is the long-term investment destination. So it's a signal to business that if you're serious about doing business in the renewables net zero space, the UK is where you can do business because we have a long-term credible plan to get there. And therefore the investment can be assured that it will work effectively. To your point, no investor likes ambiguity or flip-flopping around on a particular issue where you're making investments for 25 years, right? That's very difficult. So setting a long-term strategy and a clear signal to the markets, that is your destination, then allows more confidence, I think, for the economic development that comes.
I agree with you. I mean, policy uncertainty is the ultimate enemy
very much
for the investors and for the business.
Very, very difficult to manage as a business.
How do people in the UK feel about this government's very ambitious climate goals? Is there strong public support in that regard?
So I say the current government had just got elected, had a very ambitious manifesto of climate and energy change and action. And they got elected with the party winning 411 of the 650 seats. So I think they assume they have a clear mandate for action from the people. I think this is augmented by most surveys over time, but particularly last year, for example, where I think public perception, 80% of UK are very or mostly concerned about climate and climate action and what it means for the UK. Having seen some of the recent droughts and rains that we've had in the UK, which are unprecedented. But again, the challenge of this, and this to your point, that is, and this is where we need to be honest, is the challenge of this transition is often that the costs of the transition are up front, but the benefits are at the near the end in some ways. So it is understandable that there are now more concerns, for example, about the cost of electricity in many places, because the costs need to go up to get to the transition in the long run. So they are understandable. It is more contested now, I think, in the UK, like in many other places. But I would also say that it's important to sort of dispel some of the false information around renewables being more expensive than gas. And actually, in the UK environment, a lot of the cost of living has been driven by the electricity cost, and that has been driven by the gas prices,
Right.
which have gone up very significantly,
Sure.
doubled in the last 2 years,
In Europe.
based on all the geopolitical events that are happening. So that has been driving the cost up in the UK, not renewables.
Right.
And we need to hold steady to get to renewables, where the cost will come down.
Right. I'm sure your government will, talk about this issue that not renewable, but gas is driving up the electricity price.
Hugely.
Right.
And the volatility of that gas market
Sure.
means that we if effectively you're a customer, we inherit any of the volatility. So having more energy security, I think homegrown energy security, being green, I think gives us many more choices.
Right. You just mentioned the cost associated with this transition.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question about that. Some people inevitably will lose jobs because of this transition, and industries have to adapt. As you said, UK has shut down last year the last coal-fired power plant, which is a big accomplishment, I'm sure. What happened to those 350 workers employed in that particular power plant? What was your government policy? What happened to them?
Yeah, great question. And I think you're absolutely right that the transition needs to be managed carefully and well. So in the example of the coal power plant, the Radcliffe on Soar, it was well planned, and so it wasn't. Whilst the transition out of coal was quick, so I think 2012 it was 40% of our energy mix.
Right.
In 2024 it was 0%.
Right.
So reasonably quick, and the first G7 to move out of coal for electricity. Managing it with very, again, proactive engagement with the unions, with the plant operators, and with the actual workforce themselves to manage this transition, because we will need skilled workforce. So a lot of it is retraining, finding other opportunities in the same sort of company, working on the decommissioning site. So I think there was a lot of proactive engagement with the workforce in transitioning that coal plant to the point where I think the unions described this transition as being a very good one for the workers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was one that worked well. I mean, you don't always get it right, definitely. Sure. But I think this was an example where, because it was long in the coming, we saw it coming early, and with the planning required and the engagement required, we were able to work with the workers to find alternatives where appropriate.
Well, South Korea, our country, is also facing similar challenges because the government is trying to reduce the proportion of coal power plants in the near future. So the jobs security is a big problem for those who are working in those factories. So every country is, I can understand, is different. But based on your country's experience, what specific lessons can Korea take from your experience?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, the job security is a key part of it, and governments will want to manage that very carefully. I think I would observe that in our experience, it was the long-term planning. So again, being clear of the direction of travel as the government, and therefore with companies, about where you're trying to transition various industries, allows you then to engage and plan with them. So I'd say, I mean, it's for me, it's about the clarity of long-term, and then I think the key lesson is the early engagement. So working with the unions and with the plant operators to understand how you can help transition skilled workforce. Because again, you will need, this is a transition into a different, but probably a related industry. In the UK, it's moving out of coal, but it's into related industries that still require those skill sets. So it's how you transition workforces into the next economic opportunity.
Okay. Well, UK is, very renowned for the offshore wind energy. Of course, you also have huge onshore wind as well. But even here, there must have been conflicts, especially with local fishing communities, I can imagine, worry about their livelihoods. How did the UK deal with this issue? Well, Korea, our National Assembly just passed a special act trying to promote the offshore wind industry in Korea. So can you tell me some lessons
Yeah,
that
it's
you
a
learned.
great question, and it's complicated. I mean, delighted that the National Assembly passed the offshore bill, and we're looking to continue to work with the National Assembly on how if there's any way we can help implement it. But you're right, it's complicated, and I would observe in the UK. We mandated local consultations, so this is the ensuring that you engage with the local community of where an offshore wind investment is going. We incentivized revenue sharing models with local communities. We have looked at how you can maximize job creation in the local communities by the investment of the offshore wind investment. We have looked at where we need to do grid expansion to connect new parts of renewable energy, how those living within the grid or near the grid can get discounts by being near the grids off their energy bills, for example. We've tried to add more innovation in people buying parts of the wind turbines, for example. So trying to make it something that maybe local communities could partake in some sort of mini shareholder way. But overall, I think it's around trying to get to the point where people understand this not as a cost, but as an economic opportunity in their community. And certainly from our perspective, one of the things about the UK economy is it's very dominated by London. There are lots of things in London which drive the economy. And actually over the many years, some of the industrial towns have struggled in the UK. And in this, we see, offshore wind and green industrialization is an opportunity to re-energize those towns.
I see. Okay.
And so it's a way of bringing economic development into parts of the country which may not otherwise get it.
I hope our politicians can listen to what you just said through our show. Well, but unfortunately, around the world, there are some skepticisms about climate actions. Well, for instance, Mr. Trump is talking about drill, baby, drill still. But as you just said, UK is fully committed to green transition, and you say there are huge business opportunities and job creation opportunities in this endeavor. Why is it that? Are you sure that your government position will be the global trend toward the future?
So I'm not sure. No, I think it's contested. With the change of approach from the US administration. But I would say my view is that we need to distinguish between sort of what is noise and what has structurally changed.
Okay.
So I would ask the question: what has structurally changed about the risks and opportunities of climate that would lead one to have a very different policy? And for my assessment and my understanding, that there's nothing has structurally changed about what is fundamentally happening to our planet. And therefore, the structural responses, I think, that we are proposing in the UK, that whether that's about energy independence and security, or whether that's about economic development, or whether that's about the science of climate change, I think will come out. But it is a narrative that we need to win. It is a narrative that we need to talk to people about and debate with, to understand and debate with people and win the argument that actually the structural changes are still, the structural risks, the structural opportunities of the planet we live in are still what they were 6 months ago. In fact, even worse in some ways. So that's how I would answer it. We need to distinguish between the noise and what's structurally changed, and then we need to go and win the narrative.
I'm definitely on your side.
Great to hear.
Well, just talking about the climate crisis, that may not be enough to get people on board with energy transition. What strategies has the UK government used to gain public trust and encourage people to embrace these changes?
Yeah. I agree. But I think talking about crisis can be counterproductive sometimes, because people feel that it's too big and too far away and too distant. I think what the UK government and the UK is trying to do is to demonstrate the tangible benefits of the transition for people. And that can be anything from like higher air quality that the transition will bring, through to enjoying nature and protecting nature, of which many people enjoy, the magnificent nature of both this country and Korea. So the argument that it enhances the quality of our life and lifestyle, I think is a powerful one. back to the, again, the argument about jobs and sort of long-term economic security, I think is a key one. But also I think it's about being transparent with the public. I think the UK do this well. We're very transparent about where we are on our
Right.
trajectory and what we've done and what's working and what's not working.
Right.
So I think that's also important, that you have an honest conversation.
Right.
Whenever there's a big change, like any organization, you need to have an honest upfront conversation about the costs and challenges of that change, but the benefits, what you're trying to achieve through that
Right.
change. And sometimes we just need to be more upfront and honest, I think, with people about the cost, but the long-term benefits, or even short to long-term benefits that come from it.
As you just said, I think being honest to the people is very important.
Yeah.
That this road to green transition may not be that well paved, can be bumpy, but in the future, I mean, that's the way to go for present generation as well as our future generation.
100% agree. 100%. It's never a linear, never a straight road.
Right.
It's going to be a road of ups and downs and rounds and with potholes on the way.
Sure.
But I agree that again, back to where we started, which is the fundamental belief that this is the right direction of travel for your country.
How about your British embassy?
Yeah.
Are you doing anything? I'm sure you do to combat climate crisis. Well, here in Korea or Seoul or
Yes. So it's a big part of our mission. I mean, basically, the embassy, we have similarly, we have a mission. And one of the missions, which means it cuts across all of the embassy, is around climate and nature. And so whilst we have a dedicated team on the climate environment side, we also think about climate when we're doing our trade and investment relationship or our science and technology relationship. So it really does cut across most, if not all of the things we do as the embassy. And we've done some really fun things. So last year we did a Green Week, where for a whole week we organised a series of events with Korean counterparts to raise profile of various elements of climate and climate action. We have, with our British Chamber of Commerce, a series of talks on ESG talks, sustainable aviation fuel,
Sure.
greening AI.
Right.
So really trying to think about the cutting edge of what some of the climate choices that we have to work together. So it is really core to what we do at the embassy, and we hope to continue to work with all sorts of Koreans, to raise the profile of it and help the debate. As I said, back to winning the argument, back to debating with people, which is partly why I'm here, is, with your, the great support, the great work you do in raising the profile of climate and climate debate and climate action and why it matters to the world we live in today. And so sharing and trying to build more consensus around that long-term vision is how we see part of our role here.
And Gareth, you're in the center of those embassy activities.
I am. Yeah, delighted to be.
Okay,
because,
good. Is there anything you would like to see from our government, Korean government, in terms of climate action or cooperation?
So, I mean, the Korean government have done many things on climate, which have been hugely commendable. And we look forward to continue to work with them. I would say maybe the one thing that we really need from Korea this year is for them to come back with an ambitious NDC for the next COP, which is aligned to net zero 2050. Right. As one of the big emitters that Korea is, right. We hope to work with Korea and support them to get to an ambitious NDC, which then I think will help catalyze other countries that are watching Korea and saying, how is Korea calculating? What are they thinking? And I think it could have an oversized influence on some of the multilateral space and other countries, depending on what Korea does in the next NDC.
Okay. Well, finally, is there anything that you would like to say to our viewers of our show before we wrap up?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me, and I hope that the viewers find it interesting. So, how do we do all that? And I think as individuals, I sometimes find it very hard. It seems to be too big a problem. It's too far away. And so, I guess my last and final message is the importance that each one of us has in our voice, in terms of what we say, how we debate, who we engage with, raising our concerns with parliamentarians, with businesses, as shareholders, but also then in our buying decisions. So, what we buy in terms of where we spend our money, how we invest our money, who we invest our money with, what sort of car we buy, what sort of food we eat. They are all lots of decisions, and the billions of those decisions that could change slightly will make a big impact, I think, on the case for climate.
Okay, Gareth, thank you for sharing your thoughts. It was very informative, and thank you for coming here. 여기까지 듣겠습니다. 지금까지 게러스 위어 주한영국부대사와 이야기 나눴습니다.